However, some other factors came into play then in the last 20 years, and these include the recognition of the nutrition and health benefits of sweet potato. The processing sector, with all its power and all its resources, took interest in sweet potato as an ingredient in processed foods. Climate resilience is a greater concern now, and we quickly realize the strategic benefits from sweet potato over grains, but also other foods. And we also realize that our farmers themselves make decisions day to day in which they decide in favor of sweet potato, knowing they get a reliable yield from this crop. I said the special case of China, because China itself, actually, you see there a decline in sweet potato production. And so the total global trends, including China, then runs somewhat contrary to the rest of the world. But our greatest interest really is looking at those countries where sweet potato momentum is growing. But just for out of interest, how does that look like for India and for another country that is an innovator, the United States? In the United States, you saw a very strong growth in sweet potato production that is in a way representative of many countries in the world. And in India, on the other hand, we don't yet quite see that. We do see here a decline, rather a steady decline, with some peaks, and more recently, perhaps again, a slight increase. What you see, all these changes in production are against a fairly stable area, hectarage, under the crop. So in the US and in other countries in Africa, for example, you see steep increases in productivity and yield. So this is a bit the background, the global trend. Now, I said one of the drivers of the continued or the renewed interest in sweet potato is nutrition. If you look at a sweet potato root, if you look more specifically at 200 grams of boiled and mashed sweet potato, this is the nutrition that portion of food can give us. Starting from the bottom, the real strength is vitamin A. 700% of your daily needs of vitamin A will come from the 200 grams of sweet potato. Similarly, not quite at that level, large portions, ratios of vitamin C, potassium, and other micronutrients can come from 200 grams of sweet potato. It is labeled a superfood. I leave it to you how much you like these kind of labels. But what we know about it, it is, medically speaking, the most efficient source of vitamin A, and it is the most affordable source of vitamin A, because other comparative sources are mainly in the animal source food sector. So for poor people, in particular young children, it's a great source of nutrition. Beyond vitamin A, sweet potato provides other health benefits as well. Iron-rich varieties are being developed, including by the International Potato Center, that may provide up to 25% of iron in addition to the vitamin A from that 200-gram meshed product. Sweet potato also is known for a low to medium glycemic index, depending on the way it is processed and prepared. But boiled sweet potato is in the lower 40s, GI, so under 50 is often labeled as low, compared to potato, which also is not very bad, but it's in the lower 50s. So for that reason, it has also caught attention of health food sector. We have purple varieties, not just orange ones, and you see them cubed in there, who are very high in anthocyanins, a known antioxidant that's much valued in the health sector. We also see that the leaves, not just the roots of the sweet potato, contain the same, more or less, the same concentration of nutrients, and depending on varieties, are a very tasty food as a vegetable. Beyond nutrition, climate resilience. Now, it's easy to say that a crop is climate resilient, but we do have evidence from sweet potato production around the world, including, like this picture shows, in South Asia. This is in Bangladesh, in fact. That yields are very robust, even in very marginal environments where other crops don't perform. you still get, depending on varieties and management, 8 to up to 40 tons per hectare. The calories per hectare and unit water, according to FAO, it is the number one major food crop, performing very efficiently there, although clearly there are local specificities that need to be taken into account. It tolerates pH levels from 5 to 6.7, so it's fairly resilient and flexible there. And most of the modern varieties now are very fast maturing. Within 90 days, you can harvest fruits. Even before then, people can already harvest leaves for vegetable foods. It is also very low in input requirements. After initial irrigation, the crop doesn't need any further irrigation, nor does it need any chemicals. So this is, in a way, the promise of sweet potato. The question is, what do you do about it? How do we make it available to help farmers, help countries meet their challenges and their objectives? I want to say a little bit about what the International Potato Center, SIP, as we call it for short, is doing in that respect. So we have 3 programs at SIP, the sweet potato program, as well as a gene bank, which is a repository of germplasm managed from our head office in Peru, Lima, Peru. The gene bank, amongst other crops, also retains over 4,000 germplasms of sweet potato. And together with potato, we make them available throughout the year to interested countries. In 2019, over 5,000 requests from around the world have been followed up by sharing germplasm from the gene bank. And some of these also came to India. The sweet potato program works around the world, almost, clearly a strong emphasis on Africa and Asia. We do have an office in Delhi, and Dr. Singh, who will speak after me, is our country director. And we enjoy the hospitality and the partnership with ISAR and other partners in the country. A big part of our work is about breeding and developing new varieties. My predecessor here mentioned biofortification already as a technology that holds a lot of promise to improve nutrition. For sweet potato, that focused very much on vitamin A up to now. You see here on this diagram how many new sweet potato varieties were released since 2014 in different regions in the world, and what percentage of those new varieties were biofortified for vitamin A. That's the orange part of those columns. And you see that as far as Africa is concerned, the majority of varieties released are now biofortified. You see that in other parts, including in South Asia, this share is now also significant, and it may grow depending on the demand from these countries. In addition to vitamin A, we now also enrich through the same technology for iron. And some varieties are now under the latest stages of evaluation on bioaccessibility, bioavailability research with the University in Switzerland. So we are optimistic that soon varieties can be promoted both for vitamin A and for iron. Zinc is a key constraint in many parts of Africa because the soils are so poor, and we are also trying to enrich the same varieties again for zinc. So this staggered biofortification is what we are aiming for. But it's not only about nutrition. These same varieties also need to perform. They need to yield, they need to be able to tolerate changing climates. So our breeding program is very mindful of that, and all our varieties are being screened for that. We have had an initial focus on drought tolerance. You see here a picture of a variety called Bari SP4, that's from Bangladesh, sweet potato 4, in Gaibandha district in the northern part of the country. That's, as you see, it's a beautiful orange. It's a very well-shaped and smooth root. That's also highly drought and heat tolerant. And we would like to perhaps share that variety with other countries, including India, if there is interest. We also work on salt tolerance. A variety, sweet potato, naturally is very saline tolerant. In Bangladesh, it is now moving in and expanding in the southern part of the country, where rice production is compromised because of salinity, and sweet potato is moving in. And farmers seem to take that on. as it does require very few inputs, as we already said. We are also looking beyond these agronomic properties in the market. In the end of the day, it needs to be sold. People want to earn income, and I think in the context of what I heard about the Indian objective of doubling farmers' income, it's very important that any new variety we give to farmers also in principle can find a market and help with that objective. Then in that context, then other additional quality traits come into play. That includes the dry matter content. Most farmers prefer that to be over 30%. Not all sweet potato is at that level yet. Size and shape becomes important for the fresh market. And the processing varieties, different processors will require different properties, and they'll be very specific on what they require in terms of starch profiles and so on. If farmers want to sell into these markets, those will be decisive. There is a small market also for non-property uses of food in China that is very important. The starch for the noodle industry, they like the sweet potato starch, which is quite elaborate to extract, but farmers specifically grow these varieties just for that market. This may not yet be the priority in India. I need to say, I'm not a breeder myself, but the SIP sweet potato breeding team and the CGIAR breeders overall are really revamping and, as they say, modernizing their breeding approaches. The overall gain is to accelerate the genetic gain, both for biofortification and for all the other traits. So development cycles that used to be 8 years are now 5 years. And we want to bring them further down using genomic tools and breeding tools derived from genomic research. The sweet potato genome has almost now been mapped completely, and already some tools are being derived from that research. That is a major shift from the traditional sweet potato breeding, and we are very interested in sharing those methodologies with colleagues in ISAR as well. On the production level, and I'll be a bit mindful of the time here without going into all these details, a key constraint to productivity and indeed to adoption is the seed system. It's the vegetatively propagated crops that can be fairly tricky. We find very little commercial interest in investing in the sweet potato seed system, unlike in the grains. How to get around that particular obstacle has been part of our concern. We have developed improved multiplication methodologies and techniques that you see represented in the picture at the top, where we have high-density multiplication plot under screens that produce enormous amounts of sweet potato vine cuttings that can be then distributed to farmers. A plot like this may supply over the course of the year thousands of farmers with sweet potato planting material and can be a solid base for a rural business. And we think that from what I saw in India last week, and I'm very proud to say I went to the village like a real researcher has to do. What I saw, there's great demand for improving the seed system around sweet potato, and we think that can be done together with the extension services here. The production systems themselves, and this is a picture from Odisha, we see that some farmers have really invested and really made great progress in producing sweet potato at a great yield and very profitably. There can be further improvements with mechanization. India, coming from outside the country, is often looked at for innovation in mechanization. And it's right to say not only for the big commercial farms, but also for the small market-oriented production systems. Those equipments are missing in other parts of the world. So we would be highly interested in working with the relevant researchers here to make breakthroughs when it comes to mechanizing sweet potato production. We are very mindful, as the colleague from Extension has said, that we need different solutions for different kinds of farmers. And we want to serve a whole range of beneficiaries, from the homestead gardens in the tribal areas, like I saw last week in Jharkhand, to the smallholders, like you see here from Odisha, who have been more our traditional focus, also now to the bigger investors around the processing industry that want to work with contract farming. And nutrition. We need to remember that the first impetus for being interested in biofortification at all was about nutrition, about child nutrition. How do you get micronutrients to children in an affordable way for families who cannot maybe procure animal source food on a day-to-day basis? And we continue to work on that. Yes, we have varieties that now deliver these micronutrients in principle, but we still need to work with the communities and with the health and nutrition extension staff in those communities to make sure that's really happening. And there are issues around capacities of these households to utilize sweet potato, to prepare food, food safety concerns to some extent. We developed, as you see depicted here, some measuring spoons and measuring bowls to further support child nutrition, so that these advantages that we generated through breeding are not being lost because people don't know how to utilize the crop effectively. The markets are important. We work with fresh markets at all levels. The gentleman from Bangladesh at the top of the picture, as well as with commercial storage. Storage is a key bottleneck in marketing, given the perishability of the crop. But there are solutions available, and they need to become more energy efficient as you move on. And a particular product we are quite proud of as SID, because we have been an innovator, certainly as far as Africa is concerned, in that, is to turn the sweet potato not into flour, because the results are not all that satisfying in terms of efficiency and nutritional content, but into puree, wet puree that can be properly packaged and sealed, and that, if that is done correctly, can last 2 to 3 years without refrigeration. Working in Africa, we only think about without refrigeration, knowing everything else may be unrealistic. So that product, that puree you see here on the right-hand side, upper right, can then be an ingredient in the food industry. And it is being utilized now very widely in the baking sector. Breads, cakes, and other bakery goods use sweet potato puree to substitute up to 50% of wheat flour with sweet potato puree. And consumers take it on, and it's a prime product in the market. There is eventually the bigger prize, if you will, for us is baby foods. Weaning foods are critical for nutrition. The markets are very large for baby foods. A lot of that is now substandard or imported. The same puree, without any alterations, can be turned into a baby food, and with potentially very high social impacts. And finally, I want to talk about sweet potato as an animal feed. I told you that in China, the sweet potato production really declined, unlike the other part of the world. The reason is that up to the 1980s, sweet potato was the main feed for the pork industry, for pig raising in China. Around the 1980s, they switched to soy because it's a more industrially and even more efficient feed. And the pork industry is very industrialized by now in China. But up to that time, they raised millions of pigs a year with sweet potatoes. So we know it is a very efficient feed. And we see now among smallholders in Africa, the same is happening. They use the leaves, they use the vines, they use the roots that are not fit for human consumption. Maybe they're spoiled or infected by weevils, and they turn them into silage. Silage gives you the advantage, it has a much more nutrient-dense product, and it can be stored for up to a year to bridge any seasonal gaps in feed. Together with the sweet potato, you can use byproducts from other crops as well into that silage. And we have found, certainly for the pig production, but also for dairy, it gives you a wonderful bridging feed for farmers who cannot afford to buy commercial formulated feed all the time, but who also don't want to have a seasonal gap in feeding. For them, sweet potato is an ideal feed. And we saw that again in Jharkhand, and we heard from other states in India. There's great interest in that technology for that same reason. So, having said all these wonderful things about sweet potato, the question we have, and that's an honest question, are some of these technologies of relevance in India? We can't just presume they are without having tested them. And how do we select and then adapt them together with the Indian institutions? And how do we then get them to where they are needed? That's where the extension comes in. And I'm very pleased to see that the great capacity for that. Just a few thoughts on that, and I apologize if I go over time. We saw already the curve in India, and we were a little bit surprised to see it's amongst the top 10 countries in the world. If you look then across the states, you may be now less surprised to see which states have the largest share of production to add up to those 1.4 million tons. A lot of them obviously are in the eastern part of the country. And this is well known, and I don't need to belabor that anymore. I should say that as SIP, the International Potato Center, we've been collaborating with Indian institutions for many years, certainly for longer than I have been with the institution. I have had the privilege to, however, visit CTCRI in 2018. We had a regional meeting, as you see on this picture, with researchers, breeders, and seed system specialists from 9 Asian countries. And that was well hosted by ISAR and CTCRI. So we know there's a good foundation on which to build. Possible initiatives, and those are my last 3 slides. Ideas that have come out in discussions over the last 2 weeks since I've been in your beautiful country. One of the more immediate things one may want to consider is to evaluate new varieties. There are very many available through regional seed exchange. I know there, and Dr. Singh will speak after me on that. There are mechanisms in place to accelerate that. In addition to that, of course, we still want to support CTCRI and other institutions to upgrade their breeding capacities and to make our contribution as an international organization through germplasm and through advanced training, that capacity can be further strengthened. Secondly, looking at the targeting of sweet potato in India, there needs to be an analysis done by Indian colleagues on what would be the recommendation domains, as we used to call them. Where should we target in terms of geography and agroecologies, in terms of agronomic fit, but also in terms of social and economic fit in the market. And that is something that we would look forward to as a collaborative activity. Excuse me. On the seed system strengthening, as I said, I've observed in field visits and through previous projects, there's great demand to improve that. Bringing in the advanced technologies for managing multiplication and also for disease detection within the seed chain. It's a really critical part of the overall sector. Once you lose the quality of the seed, you can't regain it through better management. So there it's worthwhile to invest in training and technologies at that level. On the production systems, we know that water efficiency, it's a theme of this Congress, and it was mentioned throughout the last 2 days. And sweet potato in principle can give you a lot of advantages, but in principle may not be enough. You need to be very specific. Which production system, in which location would most benefit from adding sweet potato into that? And how do we manage the crop for that purpose?